Hello, my friends. Welcome again to Loving Your Assignment. Well, we've been talking about pursuing the Lord and being connected to the vine in John 15 and 5. And we talked about some controversial things about how people treat leaders and people who do ministry and how that it can affect us. So we have to be tough, right? We have to be tough and go on and do the things the Lord told us to do and let other people's opinions go. We can't be sensitive or tender, can't be soft. We have to be tough, toughen up and be strong in the Lord. We're looking at the book, The Assignment, and in the chapter that it talks about the pursuing, that means pursuing the Lord. And it talks about the perspective of a leader. Now, since we're all called into ministry, you know, pastors are supposed to equip us to do ministry. So since we're all called into ministry, that nobody is allowed to sit on the sidelines and be a spectator. Christianity is not a spectator sport, as you've probably heard before. It is not. It is something that we're all engaged. There's nobody sitting on the benches. And if we are, it's because we're in training or we're learning. But even then, you're in training and learning. You're not just sitting there observing. You're actually doing things to prepare yourself to get into full-time ministry. And I'm not talking about pay. I'm talking about being always a minister of the gospel. As pastors are taught to equip others to do ministry, to equip us to get out there and be fruitful. Remember, if you're not connected to the vine, there's no fruit. So if there's no fruit, there's a connection problem. So I want to go a little bit further into the pursuing concept. We know that it's tough. It's a tough road of ministry. We know that, but we're taught in the scriptures to go before the Lord. Let Him do the spiritual surgery in us. Let Him do the things that are necessary in us. To make it possible for us to not be so tender, not be so sensitive. You know, if somebody talked down to you when you were a child, and that became an imprint that you received, that you accepted as normal, and as an adult you realized that was wrong, and so you made your mind up, you'll never let anybody talk to you like that ever again, and so on. You are going to have to deal with that in ministry. Because there'll be a lot of people talk down to you. A lot. And you say, I can't imagine anybody doing it. You'd be amazed. I'd be in the fellowship building teaching a Sunday school class, and between the Sunday school class and the pulpit, I'd be chewed out on the way over, and I have to get up and preach the gospel like Chuck Swindoll and T.D. Jakes. And I just got eaten up in the breezeway. You see what I'm saying? It's true. But I still preach the gospel because I have learned to have tough, thick skin. And or I would not have survived the ministry over 5 decades. And so I'm telling you, the Lord will teach you, if you're going to stay in it, how to be tough and not be so affected by the opinions of others. You just have to do what the Bible says and what the Lord directs you to do. All based on the scriptures. And that's part of ministry, but we're all called to it. Just because we don't have a title necessarily doesn't mean we're not engaged. If your pastor's the only one doing visitation in your church, something wrong. How many times? When's the last time you visited? When's the last time you went out and fed the hungry? When's the last time, and so on. You see what I'm getting at. I'm not trying to condemn, but I want to bring light to the subject because it's not about the pastor. Pastor, just because he gets paid does not mean that he's paid to do that. He is paid to teach us to do ministry. He's an equipper of the saints. And then, of course, he does do visitation and so on and all that. Our pastor, where I go to church, is endlessly busy. What a wonderful, godly man he is. And I'm proud to serve under him. Under his leadership. What a great guy. And what a great example to the rest of us. He doesn't just teach us to do ministry, he goes and ministers too. He works very long hours. But here's the thing. If we have the baggage of our own history, under the blood. And that happens in an altar of prayer, by the way. That's when God goes in and does spiritual surgery in us and makes us tougher than we thought we were. When people say things, we don't take it to heart. We're not tender like little children anymore. We're tough. We're warriors on the battlefield. We got to get tough, and our armor's got to be strong. And so we don't let our personal emotional baggage get in the way of ministry, because the enemy will discover that little chink in your armor and beat you to death. You have to be tough and be equipped. Remember, keep your eye on the goal. I remember years ago I was running I think it was a 5-mile race in the Purple Martin Festival in St. Matthews, South Carolina. I don't know if they still have that or not. But it was a 5-mile run, I believe it was. And I was running up against all these young college hot shots. You know, they were great runners and all of that. And but I was just, I wasn't a contender of the first place or anything like that. But I did want to run the race, and we were house parents at a boys' home, and we had quite a few boys that were in the race with us. And so my job was just to do my best, you know. So I set my pace, and I got out there, and I ran and ran. It seemed like I'd been running a long time. And way at the end, there were cornfields all over. If you know anything about St. Matthews, it's out in the boondocks. And there were cornfields all around. You know, we're running down the road. And you know, at the very end, I could barely see the guy. I was so far down there. And he was doing like this, come on, come on. And I thought that was the finish line. And so I ran and I ran and I ran. I picked up my pace, and about the time I got close enough to see him, and I was wondering where all the people were at the finish line. And he did like this. He pointed out like that, you know. And I thought, man, I just exhausted myself to try to get to the finish line. And then he points out that way. I had another couple miles to go. And I said, so I had to set my pace so I could survive the race. But it was hilarious. But I remember some of those hot shots that were running in front of me, way ahead of me and all that. I finally, because I kept my pace and I stayed steady, I passed them one at a time, a little bit at a time, until I think I came in maybe 6th place. That's pretty good, you know, against all those college guys. You know, that's what they did. You know, they were runners. I was not. But I just kept my pace, and I didn't lose sight of the finish line. I thought I saw the finish line, and then I had to adjust and get my heart and mind back on the finish line, the real finish line. You see what I'm saying? When I did that, I was able to pace myself and go and run hard and make it to the finish line. My heart and my mind was on the finish line. That's why I was able to endure the pain of running. The finish line was more important to me than the pain of running. If you study Paul, you'll see the same thing there. The finish line was always more important to him than the things he went through. That's what made it possible for him to go through the things he went through, because he loved the finish line. In other words, we have to have a heart for Jesus that supersedes our own will. That means that we're willing to go through nonsense and ridiculous stuff and stuff that just pull your hair out because you think we should be further along than this. We should know better than this. We should have the clarity of the Gospels in us in such a way that we are mature enough not to act in certain ways. So the idea is to be able to run the race with patience and knowing that the reward at the other end is far greater than the pain we endure. So run the race and trust the Lord and be encouraged by that. Be encouraged, because it'll be worth it all someday. In the pain and trials that we endure today are not to be considered important compared to what awaits us on the other side. Oh man, I tell you, get your focus, and do ministry that way. And then what people say, ignorance will always be there. People are always going to be that way. But then on the other hand, you got those people that get it, and they're so worth it. They're so worth it. So you just keep your focus, keep your focus on that finish line, and then before you know it, you'll cross, and it'll be worth it all someday. You be encouraged when you serve the Lord. Just know that it's a tough road, and don't bring your personal baggage in with you. Get it fixed at the altar of prayer, and let God do spiritual surgery in you so that you're not hyper tender about what people say. Toughen up. Be bold and courageous for the Lord. It's so worth it. And you'll be seeing fruit in ministry over and over. Just toughen up. I love you much. I hope this is a blessing to you, and I pray that God will bless you abundantly and that you'll bear much fruit. And you pray for me too. I really appreciate that. And until next time, I'll see you. Okay, bye-bye.